It's a horrific attack. A female correctional officer was battered and held hostage for hours.
Everyone knows that prison is a place where tensions often run high. But when the very people meant to uphold order start breaking the rules, things take a disturbing turn. From a correctional officer caught on camera smuggling contraband to shocking footage of female prisoners throwing feces at officers, these moments expose the darkest side of law enforcement behind bars. Join us as we explore some of the most disturbing videos behind prison bars. Number 13, Edna Mahan Correctional Facility.
State Attorney General's office now releasing video of what they say is a night of assaults by correctional officers against female prison inmates.
We start with the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility, the only prison for women in the state of New Jersey. In January of 2021, this prison became the center of a shocking scandal. Once thought to be one of the safest correctional institutions, it revealed some of the darkest sides of the prison system.
Correctional officers have been charged in the violent beatings of inmates at the state's only women's prison.
For weeks, tension had been building as female inmates spoke out about being beaten and even touched in ways they shouldn't have been by the staff. Then, on a freezing winter night, everything came to a head. Surveillance footage captured the moment when a furious female inmate threw a liquid at the prison staff. No one knew exactly what was in it, but many believed it was a mix of urine and fecal matter. The prison staff reacted by conducting a late-night contraband search. They geared up with protective suits, carried shields, and armed themselves with pepper spray. But what happened next went far beyond a simple search. The videos that surfaced later showed officers storming into cells and attacking the inmates without mercy. Emily Dent, one of the prisoners, didn't follow the officers' commands fast enough. Without warning, she was sprayed in the face with pepper spray. She screamed in pain, "Why are you doing this? I was just sleeping." But her cries were lost in the chaos as the screams of other inmates filled the air.
Like, why would you punch me in my face? Like,
Desiree De Silva, another prisoner, was also targeted. The officers dragged her from her cell and beat her so badly that her eye socket was fractured. Through her pain, she pleaded, "Why are you hitting me? I didn't do anything wrong." But her words meant nothing to those attacking her, and the punches kept coming.
why is you grabbing my titties? Why is you grabbing my titties?
Dent and De Silva weren't the only victims. Ajaya Nelson went through something equally horrifying. She accused a male officer of searching her in a way he wasn't supposed to. The video captured her desperate struggle. "Why is a man ripping off my clothes? Why is he touching me like this?" Her voice cut through the air like a warning, exposing the terrible truth of what was happening inside those prison walls.
Little do y'all know, I'm so bad.
Another inmate, Ray Rollins, later shared her story of being kicked in the head and choked while already handcuffed. The grainy images suggested that staff had tried to cover up their actions, but the bruises on her body were undeniable proof of what she had endured.
He wasn't tough. He was, "Oh, you this, that." This is things that he would say. Like, that's not a proper thing to say to anyone.
In the end, 10 correctional officers were charged with crimes like aggravated violence, misuse of power, and falsifying records. Number 12, Honduras prison riot.
A plume of black smoke billows out of a women's prison in Honduras.
Prison riots don't just happen in the United States, but take place all over the world. One of the most violent and heartbreaking riots happened at the Tamara Women's Correctional Facility in Honduras on June 20th, 2023.
A prison riot in Honduras on August 3rd has left 3 people dead and 15 injured.
This wasn't just a random outbreak of violence. It was a terrifying event where life was lost. The riot started between 2 of the most feared and dangerous gangs in Honduras, namely Barrio 18 and MS 13. These rival groups, known for their deadly battles on the streets, brought their war inside the prison, turning it into a battlefield. According to reports, the chaos broke out early in the morning when members of Barrio 18 launched a surprise attack on MS 13. The women inside, already struggling with horrible living conditions, were caught in the middle of something brutal. Weapons like knives, guns, and even firebombs were used in the attack. Some prisoners were burned alive in their cells, their desperate screams swallowed by thick black smoke. Others were shot or stabbed, leaving pools of blood across the prison floor, making it look like a scene straight out of a nightmare.
Angry relatives want answers after at least 41 people were killed.
When rescue teams and police finally arrived, they were met with horror beyond imagination. The bodies of 41 women lay lifeless. Many burned beyond recognition or so badly injured that they were unrecognizable.
A spokesperson from the public prosecutor's office told Reuters most of the victims burned to death, while others had been shot.
Those who survived, shaking and covered in wounds, shared their horrifying stories. One woman, who asked to stay anonymous, described the nightmare. "They stormed into our cell and set everything on fire. I heard screaming, crying, and then silence. I don't know how I made it out alive." This wasn't just a tragic loss of life. It also exposed the massive failures of the Honduran prison system.
Emotions erupt outside a women's prison in the Honduran town of Tamara.
The prison was designed to hold around 400 inmates, but nearly 900 women were crammed inside, living in terrible conditions with little medical care and poor sanitation. Corruption made things worse as guards were easily bribed, allowing weapons and narcotics to flood into the prison. Instead of being a place for rehabilitation, it had become a dangerous stronghold for crime. Honduran President Xiomara Castro spoke out strongly against what had happened, promising a full investigation. "This is a dark day in our country's history. We will not allow something like this to happen again," she said. But for the families of the victims, those words meant little. Their daughters, mothers, and sisters were gone, and no promise could bring them back. They wanted more than just words.
We want to see them and know if they're okay. We want answers.
They deserved real justice and change in a prison system where human life had become worthless. Number 11, Cuyahoga County Jail.
A rare look inside the Cuyahoga County Jail, a place that's made headlines over the past year for poor conditions, abuse.
Another disturbing event in the history of United States prisons happened at Cuyahoga County Jail in Ohio in July 2018. This case not only revealed the cruelty of those meant to uphold the law, but also sparked outrage across the country. The incident involved two prison officers, Idris Clark and Robert Marsh, who were accused of mistreating a female inmate who was completely defenseless.
Cuyahoga County Jail Corrections officer admitting that he brutalized a restrained inmate.
Strapped tightly to a chair with no way to move. Surveillance footage later revealed the shocking truth. The video showed the woman tied down, unable to do anything as Idris Clark stepped forward and sprayed pepper foam directly into her face. Pepper foam is a powerful chemical that causes extreme pain and makes it hard to breathe. The inmate screamed in agony, but Clark did not stop. Instead, he kept going, while Robert Marsh joined in, punching and kicking her until she was nearly unconscious.
And is immediately punched, then pepper foamed in the face by corrections officers.
When the video was made public, people were horrified. Social media exploded with outrage, with many calling for justice. Human rights groups spoke out, demanding a full investigation and severe punishment for those responsible. The Ohio Attorney General's office launched a major inquiry, uncovering even more disturbing facts. It turned out that Clark and Marsh were not the only ones involved. 5 other jail staff members were also charged with crimes, including misuse of power and human rights violations. The findings painted a grim picture of corruption and cruelty within the Cuyahoga County Jail. This was not the first time the jail had been flagged as dangerous.
If you watch the video, what you see is what appears to be a ritual of torture.
A report from the United States Federal Bureau of Prisons had already labeled it as high risk due to repeated safety violations. The report highlighted serious issues such as overcrowding, poor sanitation, and cruelty of prison staff. Number 10, Montgomery County Jail.
There are more than half a dozen lawsuits right now against the Montgomery County Jail alleging civil rights violations.
At Montgomery County Jail in Ohio, a shocking event left people questioning the prison system. In 2015, a surveillance video came out showing a disturbing case of extreme force used by a prison officer against an inmate named Marsha P. Strickland. Though the video lasted only a few minutes, it revealed just how cruel and inhumane life could be for those behind bars. In the footage, Marsha P. Strickland, who looked frail and weak, was seen standing inside her cell. She was not acting aggressive or causing any trouble when a male officer suddenly approached her. Without warning, he grabbed her arm and forcefully twisted it. Strickland, caught off guard, had no time to react before he violently slammed her to the ground. The impact was so severe that she broke her neck. Her agonizing scream filled the room, yet no one stepped in to help. After the attack, Strickland was in unbearable pain and could not move her neck properly. She repeatedly asked to be taken to a hospital, but a nurse working at the jail refused her request. It was only after she was released that she was able to seek medical attention. Doctors later confirmed that she had a broken neck, a serious injury that could have long-term effects. Determined to seek justice, Strickland decided to file a lawsuit against Montgomery County Jail. In her legal complaint, she accused the jail of failing to provide proper medical care and allowing officers to use excessive force on inmates.
The goal to help diagnose any medical problems inmates may be dealing with when they arrive.
She also demanded compensation for the physical pain and emotional trauma she endured. However, the case remains under investigation, and Montgomery County Jail has refused to comment on the allegations. Strickland's story is not just about one person's suffering. It is a reminder of the urgent need for prison reform. Prisons are meant to rehabilitate criminals and protect society, yet without proper oversight, they can turn into places of terrible misconduct. Though Strickland's physical injuries may heal with time, the emotional scars and loss of trust in the justice system will likely stay with her forever. Number 9. Hamilton County Justice Center. At the Hamilton County Justice Center, what started as a regular day quickly turned into a chaotic and violent scene. Stephanie Stallworth, a woman in her late 30s with a tough attitude and a sharp gaze, found herself at the center of the turmoil. She refused to go back to her cell when ordered by the guards. 2 correctional officers, fully dressed in protective gear and trained in handling difficult situations, stepped in to force her back into her cell. But Stallworth wasn't about to go down without a fight. She struggled, kicked, and yelled. The security cameras caught everything as she landed a punch on one of the officers, making him stumble backward. The loud crashes, frantic shouts, and hurried footsteps echoed through the prison halls, making the whole thing look like a scene straight out of an action movie.
In the video, you clearly see strikes being thrown both ways as deputies fight for control.
Stallworth wasn't new to violent confrontations. She had already been in trouble before for attacking a police officer inside a courtroom. That happened in March of 2021, when she was in court for a charge related to public disorder. When the judge read out her sentence, she refused to accept it and lashed out at an officer, turning the courtroom into a battleground. After this latest incident, she was given additional charges for attacking an officer, which only made her sentence even longer. Number 8. Jessica Boomershine at Montgomery County Jail. One of the most talked about escape attempts happened at Montgomery County Jail in Ohio in 2020. A woman named Jessica Boomershine, who was in her early 40s, decided she wasn't going to just sit behind bars and accept her fate. She had been charged with attacking and robbing a man in his mid-80s, but instead of waiting for her sentence to play out, she came up with a daring but risky escape plan. It was the kind of thing you'd expect to see in a movie, but instead of a smooth getaway, it turned into a complete disaster, one that quickly became a joke all over social media. Surveillance cameras in the prison caught everything. Boomershine waited for the right moment when the guards weren't paying attention. She grabbed a chair and placed it right under the ceiling. Moving fast, she climbed onto the chair and started pulling at the ceiling tiles, trying to make an opening. The other inmates in the room watched in amazement. Some even started cheering her on. For them, this was like a live-action show, a break from the boredom of everyday prison life. After managing to remove a few tiles, Boomershine hoisted herself up into the dark space above and disappeared from the camera's view. For a few seconds, it seemed like she might actually make it. But then, about 15 seconds later, a loud crashing sound echoed through the room. In a hilarious twist, she had fallen straight through the ceiling, landing headfirst into a trash can before tumbling onto the floor. The other inmates burst into laughter as guards rushed in to grab her. Boomershine only suffered a few minor injuries thanks to the trash can breaking her fall, but her escape attempt was officially over. The incident quickly spread all over social media, with people calling it one of the most embarrassing prison breaks ever. While many found the situation funny, it also brought up serious concerns about life inside prisons. Her attempt didn't just fail, it also revealed how weak the prison's security was. If an inmate could so easily pull down ceiling tiles and crawl into the space above, what else could happen? The fact that nobody noticed what she was doing until she crashed down showed just how much work needed to be done to improve security and safety inside the jail. Afterward, Boomershine was given even more charges for trying to escape and damaging prison property, which meant she would spend even more time behind bars. Number 7. Pamela Smart, in Bedford Hills Prison. Pamela Smart, a name infamous in American crime history, went through a terrifying experience inside Bedford Hills Prison in New York.
It's a very serious sentence, and to me, honestly, I think it's worse than the death penalty.
It happened in 1996, and the brutal attack shocked many people. This incident didn't just reveal how dangerous prison life can be, but it also showed how high-profile inmates often become targets for jealousy and violence. Smart had been sentenced to spend the rest of her life in prison with no chance of parole in 1991. She was found guilty of working with her lover to plan the murder of her husband, and her case gained huge attention in the media. People didn't just talk about the crime. Movies and books were made about her, turning her into a controversial figure. But the same attention that made her famous also made her a target inside prison.
With appeals exhausted, she wants the governor and executive council to consider a sentence reduction.
On that terrible day, Smart was in the prison bathroom when 2 other female inmates suddenly stormed in. These women were part of a strong inmate group, and they had one goal: to hurt her. Without warning, they started attacking her, landing heavy punches and kicks, mostly aimed at her face and head. The beating was so brutal that Smart's nose was broken and her eye sockets were shattered. She screamed in pain, begging for help, but no one came to her rescue. The attackers didn't stop until they were completely satisfied with what they had done. By the time the guards arrived, Smart had already passed out from the pain. She was immediately rushed to the hospital, where doctors found that her injuries were severe. Her face was so badly damaged that she needed surgery to repair the broken bones. In a complex procedure, metal plates were placed in her facial structure to help stabilize it. Though she survived, she was left with chronic pain and permanent scars. But the worst part wasn't just the physical pain, it was the fear and trauma that followed. After the attack, Smart lived in constant anxiety, knowing something like this could happen again. As for her attackers, they were later punished and moved to different prisons to prevent them from hurting anyone else. This brutal event raised serious concerns about the safety of well-known inmates. Even in a tightly controlled environment like prison, people who gain public attention can still be targeted. Number 6. Ria Roque and Christine Orantia. On June 12, 2015, a terrifying event took place at the Oklahoma County Jail when 2 female inmates made a bold move to escape. The inmates, Ria Roque, who was 26 years old, and Christine Orantia, who was 28 years old, came up with a risky plan. It all started when they asked a female detention officer for a change of clothes. At first, everything seemed normal, but the moment the officer handed them the clothing, things took a violent turn. Without warning, both women attacked the officer with force. Orantia kept hitting her, making sure she was too weak to fight back, while Roque quickly grabbed the officer's duty belt. This belt carried the keys to the jail, and Roque saw it as her way out. She wasted no time and rushed to unlock the doors of other inmates, possibly hoping to cause chaos and make escaping easier. However, her plan didn't go as expected. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get the locks to open. Meanwhile, the detention officer, though outnumbered and injured, fought back with everything she had. She managed to hold on long enough for backup to arrive. Within moments, more officers stormed in and took control of the situation, stopping the escape before it could go any further. Sheriff John Wetzel later praised the officers' courage, saying they were lucky she wasn't seriously hurt. He also pointed out that her quick thinking and training had made a huge difference. After looking deeper into the case, investigators found out that Roque had carefully planned the escape and had hopes of fleeing to Mexico if it worked. But now, instead of freedom, both inmates are facing even more trouble. Roque, who was originally jailed for illegal substance possession, now has several new charges against her, including aggravated violence, battery on a peace officer, first-degree robbery, and attempted escape.
That they think the two have been planning this for quite some time now. Now, another interesting point, 5:30 a.m., that's when the two escaped.
Orantia, who was already in custody because of a Texas warrant for escaping a different prison, also faces similar charges. What started as an escape attempt ended up making things much worse for both women. Their plan failed, and now they will be spending even more time behind bars. Number 5. Richland County Jail. On January 8, 2019, a shocking and intense fight broke out at the Richland County Jail. Surveillance cameras captured the moment when inmate Tracy Brooks, who was 32 years old, suddenly attacked Corrections Officer Alexandria Strong in a violent outburst. What started as a routine task quickly turned into a terrifying scene.
Tonight, we go behind the scenes on a tour of the jail with the chief deputy.
Officer Strong was helping a nurse pass out medication to inmates when Brooks walked up to her, demanding to know when she would be released. Strong calmly explained that she had no control over release dates, but Brooks didn't like that answer. She got angry and started throwing insults, making the situation even more tense. Things took a turn for the worse when Brooks was told to turn around so she could be handcuffed. Instead of listening, she refused and pulled away when Strong tried to grab her wrist. That's when the situation exploded into violence. The footage showed Brooks swinging at Strong before shoving her hard onto the floor. As the struggle continued, Brooks punched Strong in the face several times and even tried to choke her by wrapping her hand around the officer's neck. Some inmates saw what was happening and reportedly tried to step in to calm things down, but Brooks kept attacking. The fight finally ended when other corrections officers rushed in, using pepper spray to stop Brooks and bring everything under control. Both Brooks and Strong were injured during the fight. Brooks later claimed she had broken her hand, while Strong was diagnosed with a concussion. After the incident, Brooks was transferred to another facility to wait for her trial. She had already been locked up for missing 2 separate court appearances, but now she was facing even more serious trouble. She was charged with felonious violence, adding more time to her sentence. Number 4. King County Correctional Facility. On 1 October morning in 2001, the day at King County Correctional Facility started with a lot of tension in the prison. Officer Richardson, who the inmates called Screaming Demon, was already on edge while dealing with the prisoners. One of them, Ashley Caswell, had been yelling at her from inside her cell. Now, this wasn't anything new as these two had never gotten along. Richardson was known for taking away Ashley's free time, keeping her locked in her cell all day.
One of our lockdown inmates in there, Ashley Caswell, she was yelling and screaming out of her cell at.
And let's be honest, that would get under anyone's skin, but for someone like Ashley, it was even worse. Then, things took a sharp turn for the worse. Instead of trying to calm the situation down, Richardson did the opposite. She opened Ashley's cell door so she could come down and take her meds. The second that door clicked open, it was clear this was about to go sideways. And sure enough, Ashley didn't just step out, but came flying out, full of rage, like she had been waiting for this moment all day. Richardson tried to take control, but Ashley completely lost it. She started throwing garbage trays and juice across the room, sending everything into chaos. Officers jumped in fast to get the situation under control, but the tension between the two didn't go away. Later that day, during pill distribution, Ashley wasn't done. She snapped again, grabbing anything she could get her hands on and throwing it. The officers reacted quickly, making sure the fight didn't turn into a full-blown riot. But even after things settled, the bad blood between Ashley and Richardson was far from over. It was clear this wasn't the last time these two were going to clash. Number 3, the Albion Correctional Facility. The Albion Correctional Facility in New York became the center of a shocking case of mistreatment when a prison guard named Donald Lasker was found guilty of a terrible crime. Lasker was convicted of statutory carnal misconduct after he forced himself on a female inmate and threatened her to keep quiet.
Sexually abused female prisoners on a routine basis.
This case exposed serious problems within the prison system, showing just how vulnerable female inmates can be. At first, the inmate, who chose to remain anonymous, was too afraid to speak up, fearing what might happen if she did. But over time, she gathered the courage to report the misconduct. Her bravery set off an investigation that eventually led to Lasker's conviction. The court discovered that he had taken advantage of his position, using fear and intimidation to control his victim. His actions were not just a betrayal of trust, but a severe misuse of power. When the case finally came to an end, Lasker was sentenced. His punishment included spending 10 weekends in jail, being placed on probation for 10 years, and being registered as a Level 1 offender. However, many people felt that this sentence was far too lenient. Prison reform advocates argued that the consequences did not match the seriousness of the crime. They pushed for stronger protections for inmates and stricter penalties for those who misuse their authority, hoping to prevent future cases like this one. Number 2, West Virginia Correctional Facility. Brian Moore went through a terrible experience while locked up in a federal prison in West Virginia.
When you talk about trouble in the West Virginia prison system, you're talking about the West Virginia Penitentiary here in Moundsville.
A high-ranking officer took advantage of his position to take her into areas without cameras, where he attacked her. She knew he had the power to stop her from being moved to a facility closer to her daughter, so she was too scared to speak up. Women who reported mistreatment often ended up in solitary confinement or faced other punishments, making it clear that staying silent was the safest option. The prison system did little to stop this kind of misconduct, leaving Moore and many others defenseless. The Bureau of Prisons Office of Internal Affairs had a massive backlog of 8,000 cases, some left unresolved for more than 5 years. With little oversight, officers like the one who hurt Moore continued their crimes without fear of being caught. For years, she kept quiet, knowing justice was unlikely. People started paying more attention to the issue when Senator John Ossoff led an investigation into prison cruelty. During a hearing, he called out the system's failure to protect inmates.
Improvements include 50 new guards added after the riot,
describing the carnal violence as a human rights violation and a clear breach of the 8th Amendment. The newly appointed director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Colette Peters, admitted she had no explanation for why major reforms had not happened sooner. She recognized the huge power difference between inmates and staff and promised to push for better oversight, including more cameras and body-worn devices, but only if Congress agreed to fund them. Eventually, Moore decided to speak out and testified before the subcommittee about what she had been through. She talked about the fear of retaliation and how the maltreatment shaped her time behind bars. She also reflected on the choices that led to her being in prison in the first place. As a young mother struggling with money, she had turned to selling crack cocaine, a decision that led to her arrest and sentencing. Her testimony, along with growing evidence of widespread cruelty, forced prison officials to admit there was a problem. But like many survivors, Moore knew that punishing one officer was not enough, because real justice would only come with real change in the system. Number 1, Central California Women's Facility. Latasha Brown spent more than 20 years suffering from mistreatment in women's prisons across California. At least 5 prison officers attacked her, including Gregory Rodriguez, who was later hit with nearly 100 charges of carnal mistreatment. These officers controlled everything, including food, hygiene supplies, and basic privileges, and used that power to take advantage of women. Brown explained that the mistreatment was so common that it felt like part of prison life, and anyone who dared to report it risked serious punishment, like being thrown into solitary confinement or even having their sentence extended. Rodriguez, like many others, started out by acting friendly, slowly building trust before turning violent. Women like Valerie initially thought he cared about them, only to realize later that they had been tricked. As time went on, He attacked them in places with no cameras and made sure they kept quiet. Brown, who had been mistreated even before she was locked up, learned to suffer in silence. She knew that speaking up would only bring more problems. She saw firsthand how officers covered for each other, either looking the other way or even helping with the mistreatment. The impact on the victims was overwhelming. Many battled post-traumatic stress, depression, and constant anxiety. Brown described always being on edge, trying her best to go unnoticed. Even after release, some women struggled in the outside world, especially in jobs where they had to be around men. Despite all this pain, coming forward was risky. Women who spoke out were often punished or isolated, making it clear that staying quiet was the only way to survive. Things finally started to change when Rodriguez was arrested and charged following an internal investigation. His victims stepped up and shared their stories, exposing just how deep the problem ran. Brown and others spoke publicly, shining a light on the prison system's failures. The case sparked public outrage and calls for major reforms, but Brown made it clear that locking up one bad officer wasn't enough. True justice, she argued, could only come with real changes to protect women behind bars from ever going through this again. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.